Okay, picture this. It's a dark night, deep in the English countryside, back in 1963. There's a high-speed mail train just powering down the tracks on its way to London. It's a trip it makes all the time, but tonight is different. Because this train is secretly carrying an absolute fortune. And a gang of criminals is waiting in the darkness, about to pull off what would go down in history as the crime of the century. Right on the dot, 3 a.m., August 8th, the driver, a guy named Jack Mills, sees something up ahead that just doesn't make sense. A red signal at a place called Sears Crossing. Now that was weird. That light was almost never red, especially not for the Royal Mail Express. So Mills hits the brakes, and that roaring engine grinds to a halt, right in the middle of nowhere. Everything goes completely silent. So, why all the fuss about this particular train? Well, inside, stuffed into mail bags, was an amount of cash so huge it's hard to even wrap your head around. We're talking about the equivalent of 67 million pounds today. This wasn't just a train. For all intents and purposes, it was a bank vault on wheels. Now, this wasn't some random, sloppy job. Oh no, this was a plan that was months in the making. A true work of art, really. A heist built not on just brute force, but on something much, much more valuable: inside information. The entire thing, and I mean the entire operation, was only possible because of tips from one person. A shadowy figure, a senior security officer from inside the Royal Mail itself. This inside man, whose name we still don't know, gave them a couple of pieces of info that created the perfect storm, a chance that would never come again. So check this out. First, the insider tells them that the usual coach, the one with all the alarms and security, was in for repairs. A backup coach was being used instead. A coach with, get this, 0 security features. No alarm, nothing. And to top it all off, because it was right after a long holiday weekend, the train was carrying nearly 10 times the normal amount of cash. I mean, you couldn't write it any better. It was the perfect opportunity. So with that perfect plan in hand, a gang of about 15 men gathered there in the dark. All those months of planning, all of it, was about to come down to just a few minutes of action. This was it. The heist of the century was on. And boy, were they precise. At 3 a.m., they stop the train using a battery to power a fake red signal. The go-driver hops out to use the emergency phone, only to find the lines have been cut. The gang just swarms the cab, overpowering Jack Mills. Then, they uncouple the engine and the first 2 coaches from the rest of the train and force the driver, who was injured, to move their prize a little further down the tracks. Their target destination was a spot called Bridego Bridge, just about a kilometer away. And waiting in the darkness below was their getaway truck. The gang busts into the high-value coach, ties up the staff inside, and then forms this human chain, passing bag after bag of money from the train, down the embankment, and into the truck. How many bags are we talking about? 120. 120 mail bags overflowing with banknotes. That's over 2.5 tons of money. They worked so fast they actually had to leave 8 bags behind because they just ran out of time. They'd pulled it off. It was a perfect crime. But right as they were about to vanish into the night, one of the gang members made one tiny little mistake, a single careless comment that would bring their whole perfect plan crashing down around them. As they left the terrified postal workers tied up, one of the robbers turned back to them and gave a simple instruction. He said, "Don't move for 30 minutes." It was meant to buy them more time, to make sure no one raised the alarm too quickly. But it ended up being the single biggest clue they could have possibly left behind. So why was that so important? Well, because it literally gave the police a countdown clock. They knew exactly how big of a head start the gang had. A quick calculation told them the robbers couldn't have gotten any farther than a 50-kilometer radius in that time. The hunt was on, and the police knew exactly where to draw the circle on the map. So, about 45 minutes after the heist, the gang shows up at their hideout, a remote place called Leatherslade Farm. They're on top of the world, celebrating, listening to the police chatter on their radio. But that feeling of victory, it wasn't going to last long. They hear it right there on the radio. Police are already setting up roadblocks and searching farms inside their 50-kilometer zone. Absolute panic sets in. The original plan to lay low for a few days and then burn the place to the ground, totally out the window. They just split the money as fast as they could and fled, leaving the guy they'd paid to torch the place to just grab his cut and run too.
So when the police, tipped off by a local farmer, finally show up, what do they find? Well, basically everything. Empty mailbags, the getaway truck, you name it, a forensic gold mine. But the most incredible, most damning piece of evidence they found was a simple board game.
You can't make this up. In that brief moment when they were celebrating, the gang had started a game of Monopoly, but instead of using the fake paper money from the box, they used the real stolen cash. And in their rush to get out of there, they completely forgot to wipe down the board, the pieces, anything. Their fingerprints were all over it. It was the breakthrough Scotland Yard needed to start putting names to the faces. Once the police found the farmhouse, the net started closing in, and fast. It led to arrests, a massive trial, and sentences that would pretty much seal the fate of everyone involved in the crime. 30 years. For most of the robbers who were caught, that was the sentence. 30 years in prison. The judge wanted to make an example of them. He saw this not just as a robbery, but as an attack on the country itself. And he handed down sentences that were way, way harsher than normal for a crime where nobody was actually killed. When the dust settled, the results were pretty grim. Out of the main gang, 14 were caught and sent to prison. The inside man, he just vanished, never identified. And maybe the most tragic part of this story is what happened to the driver, Jack Mills. He was hit over the head during the robbery and suffered from the trauma for the rest of his life. He never felt safe enough to drive a train again, and he died only 7 years later. So even though most of the money was never found, and a few of the robbers later made some pretty famous prison escapes, the biggest mystery of the Great Train Robbery is the one that started it all. After more than 60 years, we still have to ask, who was the man on the inside? Who was the person who made the crime of the century possible in the first place? It's a secret that, to this day, has